right. The fire of commitment. So we've entered the heat of summer. Have you noticed? If you were in France, you would have noticed by now, apparently. We don't notice in Santa Cruz so much. It was great this morning. I mean, my gratitude practice is Sunday mornings when I cross the summit. Oh, this might make you jealous. I don't know. But I hit the summit, and because I live in Santa Cruz, I don't have an AC in my car. It just doesn't, But I hit the summit, and then I had to put all the windows down at once because it instantly rises like 20 degrees. So I was writing this sermon. I was trying to get in the spirit with my coffee and my fog, but once I got over the hill today, I was like, oh yeah, it is summer. Okay, here we are. So summer in the ancient world, you may know, it's pretty logical, was a time of fire, right? It makes sense. It's like everything's heating up. Wildfires are a possibility, right? So are parties. You got any good summer parties planned? Spontaneous summer parties, unplanned? Could be really quite fun. So in the ancient world, they were very respectful of fire, especially in this area. Although we have drained a lot of the water out of this area in the last couple of centuries, it's always been a place where wildfires were possible. And so during this time of year, for ancient people, attunement to the seasons let them know, oh, this is a time to work on our respect for the great element of fire. It also happens to be a hot time on planet Earth. Did you notice? A little bit. So I have a dual purpose in this sermon because some of us are a little bit concerned about that. And you may also know, has anybody ever tried to garden in the summertime? Or I worked on a farm for a little while in the summertime. So in the summer, in the other months, it's a little bit differently. In some places in winter, you don't do anything at all, and you sleep to recover from the rest of the year. Or in more temperate zones, you do little moderate stuff, indoor stuff, you can pickle things and can them and whatever. But in the summertime, you wake up wicked early, and you work from like 6 till 11 or something like that. And then you go inside and you take a couple of naps. And then at about 4:30 or 5, you go back out and you work until 8 or 9. Right? So there's this understanding of this fire element time of year that if you tried, did anybody try to ever, nobody initiated you, and so you tried to work on the farm from 8 to 5, that's a standard work day, a good, honest work day. You'll collapse in the middle of the day because it's just too darn hot. Right? So I was inspired today by some teachings I got from a Buddhist teacher about how to live our passion. And he gave this slogan, which I will now give to you, which said, you can either burn up with your passion, or you can burn out from your passion. So today, of course, in the hot summer, I'm sort of inspired by environmental activist work. That's where my sermon today is coming from. That's my orientation. But I think it means just about anything that we're passionate about, that we're committed to. So whatever your passion is, do you have one? Maybe we need to do that talk as a prerequisite. No, you probably got one. Is it your child? Is it Uuflg? We have an opening for that person. Come on over. But even if you took that job, the minister would have to be like, now I want to make sure you don't burn out. I see that ministers everywhere are trained for this. Look at your best volunteers and make sure they're not going to fizzle because they're so excited. So how do we, but then with the thing like environmental activism, or your kids, or your dog, or something like that, something that requires an intensity of attention and intention and love. How, there's not a chance where you're like, well, my kid is cool and all, but sometimes I just need a break. You're not going to stop being a parent just because, give them to grandma if you've got one of those, of course. But with environmental activism, of course, you do have to take a weekend off sometimes and not think about it, but that doesn't mean that the wheel stops turning, right? Someone else will step in to that ball. There isn't anyone else to step into those volunteer jobs about a lot of these things that are our true heart's love, gift, and passion. So it could be very important to us to learn how to burn up without burning out. Relatable or unrelatable? Okay, so this is my favorite hashtag from the modern internet world. Relatable hashtag. Relatable. Okay, well, cool. So, in my mind, I was thinking of the metaphor that to burn up with our commitment, with our passion, with our fire of hope and faith is sort of like being like the sun. Have you ever known a really inspired and inspiring person? Right? The cool thing is, in yoga philosophy, they always say, it's this cool thing. Not only do you light up yourself, but you light up all of those around you. Right? The heat and light is something that beams off of you. And with the sun, we don't really worry. I mean, in our time frame, we don't really worry about the sun getting burned out. Right? There's that famous, I think it's Hafiz's poem, maybe it was Rumi, one of those two cool cats, who said, after all these years, the sun never looks at the earth and says, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. Right? And so I was thinking this morning as I drove and the temperature started increasing, we don't hear the sun saying, I'm getting really burnt out. I think I'm going to have to turn it down for a little while. Right? Now that dude he goes on and on until a supernova. There's somebody at Katy Perry song about it or something. So, it's pretty epic. But, do I have a prop? Oh my gosh, they said if you're going to give a good talk, you should always have props. But often our commitment is like one of these. It's fun. It's the same nature as the sun. Short-lived prop, but perfect. It's the same. It's fire. It's still fire, right? But if you don't guard and tend and make sure, and then that thing's gonna go out despite your best efforts to keep it burning. So I wanted to contemplate a little bit today our commitment, the fire of our passion and willingness to show up. It's like a fire, but we could be sun-like or we could be match-like. And I think it's important to know how you get to either one of those states if we're going to thrive. Has anyone felt match-like lately? Yeah, I've felt a little match-like some of these recent weeks. What about sun-like? Is there a time in your life where you felt sun-like? It's on. Here's my commitment. Ain't nothing going to do anything about that. So we know these two capacities are in us. The good news is we are neither sun-like nor match-like in our essence. We could be either one of those things. And it's a matter of sort of finding the gear shifter or the toggle. When I was a young kid, they used to have these things that switch from your video game box to the antenna. We've got to find the toggle switch inside to figure out how is it that some people or some of us at some times can live sun-like. And it's as if we've got a source of energy that keeps feeding us, and at other times we live match-like. And it's as if no matter how much we love and how hard we try, there just doesn't seem to be enough fuel to keep that fire going. So the first thing I wanted to contemplate with you is that whether we are a sun or a match is a matter of how we identify ourselves. It's a matter of how we identify ourselves. So our sense of self is actually quite malleable. Did you know this? This is this standard Buddhist trope that I want to give you. They always say, it gets really misinterpreted because people are like, oh, Buddha said I don't have a self. And then everybody's like, but who's supposed to meditate? It's a challenging thing. Westerners always get that one really quickly because, I'm a soul. Anyway, what they mean is that your sense of self, who you are, is actually quite malleable. We think, who am I? Well, I'm the minister at Uuflg. Okay, well, what if a giant meteor, God forbid, took out Uuflg? Who would you be then? Well, I guess I would be the ex-minister. It doesn't quite work like that. Who you are is really quite this malleable thing. So I've been reading this great book that I'm going to be advertising to you all through this sermon and probably in weeks to come. And it's by a Unitarian Universalist named Joanne Macy, who's also an ecologist. And she was talking about this technique that says if you identify as little old me, and I have to do something about rainforest deforestation. Right? Have you tried this, like this morning or in the last 5 minutes? Little old me has to go and stop. It's like the football field every 5 minutes or something like that. It's really, it's ridiculous. And little old you should probably feel quite helpless in the face of these bulldozing the football fields, mostly to plant beef. But no, they don't plant. They plant things that feed the beef, and so it's all the water that it takes to grow those plants then goes into cows where a forest used to live, right? And little old you is going to go and it'll feel a bit fatiguing. Do you get the idea of that, right? So what she proposes, and what a lot of environmentalists propose, is that we have to change our sense of identity. That rather than little old me all alone is trying to do this. There's a great rainforest activist named John Seed, and when asked, well, how do you sustain your hope? All of these things are blocking you, and all these people are sort of tormenting you. And he says, well, I'm not me. I'm just the latest evolution of the rainforest. I'm the rainforest recently evolved into a speaking voice and human hands and walking feet. So this harkens me back. I did a sermon a while ago called "What Would Gaia Do?" Right? That was a punchline or something like that, right? And I stole this great technology from the Christian church that says, "What would Jesus do?" And I said, "Okay, think about it. If you were Mother Earth, what would Mother Earth do?" So we were going shopping, right? And it's like, I could buy these hemp and bamboo toilet papers that might scratch my sensitive little bum a little bit, but they're wrapped in bioplastics that's going to biodegrade in a couple of days. Or I can get the cheaper one that's also softer. How convenient. And as little old me, because this is a big problem, right? It seems like it's comfort versus environmentalism. Have you heard this debate? Like if you listen to NPR or something like that, you'll hear people doing this. But how are we going to get people, blah, blah, blah. And what many environmentalists have found is that if you are coming from a sense that you are you, right? I'm little old me, all separate. And then I go, well, what can I do? Oh gosh, it's hard to change my diet. Changing your diet? Have you tried to change your diet? That's hard. You gotta find new recipes on Pinterest. It's really hard. I might not. Right. But gotta get out of character here. It's hard to switch back and forth too. But if you thought, I am the latest sprout of Mother Earth, and then what would I do for me in the supermarket? Right. It's a no-brainer. And people have actually found this. When they figure out how to make this shift, they go like, well, which toilet paper would Gaia buy? Oh, well, it's a no-brainer. It's like, oh gosh, what a tough decision. It's like, well, I could probably pay 35 more cents to support the production of bamboo instead of chopping down an old growth forest. I probably can. It's a stretch. I could probably learn how to cook beans to save a ton of water and greenhouse emissions. Like I probably could. Little old me, it is actually hard. It's really hard. You gotta read consumer reports on what kind of car to buy, or you gotta do a car share with your partner and your neighbors and stuff like that. But if you didn't think of just, my little desires and my comforts and my conveniences are what's most important, but we literally felt as if we were something bigger, those become no-brainers. They become no-brainers. So, I don't know, is that relatable or too weird? Or I have proofs. I have logical arguments here, but I don't know how much time we have. I'll give you a couple of them. But the sense I want to get, we talked about this a few weeks ago, is the sense of being little old me is actually where most of our emotional discomfort comes from. This is one of the things I want to highlight and lift up that a lot of environmentalists will tell you nowadays, which is our culture of convenience, where I've got my little car, my little earbuds, and my little house, and that actually gives rise to a great degree of the anxiety and loneliness and depression, which are epidemic in our world, right? I'm not dismissing some of the time we do get chemical depression, right? And that's not making more friends will actually help with that, but it's not to dismiss that. It's that there's a lot of us with like low-level anxiety and dissatisfaction, and it goes right along with material wealth, actually, over a certain point, if they cap it at 70,000 a year. After that, it just tends to make you more lonely. But specifically with isolation, with bigger fences, with thicker walls, with the ability to sit there on my internet and debate with people instead of going to a cafe and making a new friend. So it's really quite like, I'm trying to get this idea that it's not hard and arduous to develop a bigger sense of me. It's actually something that I take note sometimes at like these Buddhist teachers' talks, and I know I look like I'm just like, oh, do you go to a Buddhist talk, #relatable. So she says, here's your key phrase, she says, instead of asking questions like, what do I have to do? Oh God, how am I going to solve this? You can ask, what happens through me? What happens through me? And for me, this sort of begins to dissolve this notion that I'm working alone, that I'm working in a vacuum, that I have only my own limited resources, that only my little brain's ability to figure out the solutions are what are going to create the solutions. And instead, I can get a literal sense that life herself wants to flow through this vessel. And I personally may not even get to take any credit for that, right? But something happens where my constricted, match-like, lack of fuel nature starts to transform into this more sun-like, open, abundant, solar energy type nature. And all of the fatigue, all of that despair about whether I would be able to keep my fire of commitment going, for a moment goes away when I ask, what happens through me? What wants to happen through me? Okay, so some of my proofs, just quickly. Did you know there's a super learning technique? If you want to learn a new language, they say you should create for yourself a character from the culture of the language that you're learning. Right? So I didn't learn Spanish very well, but like let's say I wanted to, I would like take my middle name and then I would be Miguel. Right? So in some Spanish classes, they'll have you like, you're not Rev Fa Jun, the Chinese name anymore, you are Miguel. And so you would, and something happens, it's like this method acting thing. Your brain categorizes that information and soaks it up quicker when you think, I am no longer Reverend Fa Jun, I am Reverend Miguel. I don't know how to say Reverend in Espanol, so sorry. Lo siento. I've done it with lifestyle choices personally. If you want to adopt a new diet or lifestyle, does anybody want to do this right now? You don't have to say what it is, you just have to let me know. Is anybody trying to eat more greens or drink more water or walk to the store or whatever, right? So it's really hard. This is this cool stuff about how persona works, how our mind works. It's really hard if you go like, oi, me who doesn't drink any water, I'm going to try to drink more water. I think I can do it, and then you don't. They say, and I've tried this out, if you make a vision of yourself, like what's life going to look like when you're getting 8 to 10 8-ounce glasses of reverse osmosis with trace minerals out of that, whatever you're doing, right? That's the way to go, though. So like, what kind of radiant hippie are you going to be with all that hydration like puffing out your skin? It's going to be amazing. And then all you do is instead of trying to like bootstrap yourself from little old me, the dehydrated fool over here who never did it right, but so next week I probably will, to, oh yeah, I'm the guy who drinks more water. You will naturally reach for that water because you have this sense of who you are. Our brains are that easily trickable. Don't believe me, just ask and ask. Oh, they won't tell you. It's secret, the type of manipulation that we use in advertising, but it's the same darn thing. We create an identity, and then we give you the products that support that identity. As a meditation or yoga instructor, you know you can get people to come back if you get them to buy meditation clothes. A yoga mat. Once we invest in that identity, it's on. It is on. Our identities are malleable. They found this with addiction as well. It's slightly different. It's not like, oh, I'll just visualize myself as a less addicted person. But when your identity expands to where you realize where that's going, and you decide, I want to be this person instead of this person, it makes it that much easier to catalyze the type of change. When you look at who am I to my family versus who do I want to be, and you can compare those two images, it's much easier to choose. I mean, there's still a lot of work to follow, but it can be that little straw that lifts the camel's back. I gotta think of a good metaphor, reverse camel metaphor there. What about, here we go. Did you ever notice if you had a kid or a dog or a grandkid, here is an example of a kid and some dogs, that your identity of who you are suddenly expands. You're now two people, right? We have this survival instinct, right? It's a really cool thing. That goes like, oh, if you try to hurt me, I'll get away or I'll fight back or something like that. Now, if you try to hurt this person, it's the same survival instinct. Like, it's not like you have to think about it. It's a fight or flight as if they hurt your own flesh. That's cool. And some of our little doggies too. So our identity is quite malleable. And there's a great source of power in that. Okay, last one. This is an old Buddhist argument, so I have all of these proofs for the debate ground in my head. But it's a little darker. So they say actually like let's use an easy one. Let's say if you had to have a tooth pulled, has anybody ever had their wisdom teeth out, or like you had to have a tooth pulled? Okay. Immediately, once the tooth fairy exchanges that for a silver dollar, that tooth is no longer you. True or false? While it's in your face, if they put the drill toward that thing, hey, that's me. So if Mike Tyson came to slug you in it, no, that's mine. That tooth is me. The minute it's out of your face, that's not me anymore. Right? So we have these interesting things where we think, here's me. I am not the rainforest. I am not the gophers and the ground squirrels, the great mountains of God's green something or other. I'm me, and what can I do as me? But when I realized that sense of self it's not really true. It could be that I'm part of this fellowship, that I'm part of a particular family, or it could be that life, that Gaia, wants to happen through me. And when I ask this question personally, what wants to happen through me, a lot of that hope and despair, because one, I get myself off the pedestal about like, well, I have to do something today. And then, interestingly, when I get off that pedestal, all of a sudden all these great ideas and all of this energy come through me that I really can go out and start to help. Okay. Oh yeah, it feels good. Here's my last proof. Did you ever love a kid or a dog? Okay, who loved a kid or a dog or a cat? All right. Some of you guinea pig lovers will not be represented today. But did you know how good that feels? Like we have this little cat that we're taking care of. We don't have a cat of our own, but my housemate has a cat. She comes and sleeps on the bed because she needs comfort. And then somehow, like when she's like, can I have comfort? And you're like, yeah, and the heart goes, it's not like, I'm not sure how much comfort I have to give. There's an infinite amount of comfort you have to give if we can tap into who we really are. So this is this thing, and I want you to tell all your friends that these deep ecologists are trying to tell us, like, it's not a burden to stay committed. It's not a burden to keep fighting. It's not a burden to hold up justice as your central value. It's who we really are. We're not actually matches. I got to take care of my life, and the kids will get to college, and I got to make responsible choices, but how responsible can you really be? No, who you really are is what wants to happen through me for the benefit of us all. Okay, what's that? Oh, not there yet. Let's see the cute pictures up yet. What we're really talking about is hope. Don't you think? If we're going to keep this fire of commitment going, we're kind of talking about hope. But hope is this is a poem I just wrote you this morning. Hope is a slippery slope. Hope is a slippery slope. It's a very short poem. That's all I read so far. But have you noticed that hope can occasionally make you sunlight? Right? In classical yogic Buddhism, they say there are three forms of nourishment. There's material nourishment, food and water. There's air, and there's hope. These are the three things a human needs to survive. If you take away any of them, you cannot survive. So we need that. But then there's also, if we get too hopeful, or we get hopeful and then we realize the gravity of what we've undertaken, our light can go out just like that match. So I wanted to read you a passage from a personal story. The second meaning is about desire. When Jane asked what she'd like to have happen in our world, without hesitation, she described the future she hoped for, the kind of world she longed for so much it hurt. In this kind of hope that starts our journey, knowing what we hope for and what we'd like or love to take place. It is what we do with this hope that really makes the difference. Passive hope is about waiting for external agencies to bring about what we desire. Active hope is about becoming active participants in bringing about what we hope for. Active hope is a practice like Tai Chi or gardening. It is something we do rather than have. It is a process we can apply to any situation, and it involves three key stages. First, we take a clear view of reality. Second, we identify what we hope for in terms of the direction we'd like things to move in, or the values we'd like to see expressed. And third, we take steps to move ourselves or our situation in that direction. Since active hope doesn't require our optimism, we can apply it even in areas where we feel hopeless. I'll read that one again because I like it. Since active hope doesn't require our optimism, we can apply it even in areas where we feel hopeless. The guiding impetus is intention. We choose what we aim to bring about, act for, or express, rather than weighing our chances and proceeding only when we feel hopeful. We focus on our intention and let it be our guide. So I love this because it's a little bit, I have like a home ec teacher in my head sometimes who like tries to tell me to be practical. And it's like, well, don't rest too much on that hope. And there's something that's true in that, right? Because we've gotten hopeful about things, and then when they don't happen soon enough, the hope withers and falters. But there's a different kind of hope, and it's more about our intention. So even if I don't see progress on what I want next month, that particular type of hope is not going to get fatigued, right? It's an intention. It's the better world that I know is possible. It's what love wants to do through me. Okay, let's wrap it up. So I was reading a Zen book, and they were talking about, they mentioned a metaphor that I had heard before. So if we're talking about hope, we're also talking about faith in a way. This is another one of these somewhat synonyms. And do you remember anybody who went to Bible school like I did, the famous Jesus quote about faith? Do you remember Jesus' famous quote about faith? Something about, I'll give you a hint. What was it?
Mustard seed.
Something about a mustard seed, right? Yeah. If you had faith just the size of a mustard seed, you could look at that mountain and say, get up and move over there, and it would move. Right? So it's kind of cool, but then, I don't know, modern liberal Unitarians are like, well, okay, Jesus, but I never saw anybody do that. Right? I mean, it's a cool myth, bro. So I was reading this Zen book the other day, and lo and behold, they're talking about mountains and mustard seeds. I was like, did you know Jesus? So Master Shenhui said, a mustard seed may enter Mount Meru, and Mount Meru may enter a mustard seed. And that's not supposed to make any sense because it's a Zen koan. But the sense of it like a good Zen koan did, it unfolded all of this stuff in my mind, which is, think of the biggest mountain you can think of. That's what Mount Meru is supposed to be in ancient India. So Everest, right? Or one big mountain you've experienced? Like what's the one in Washington? Rainier, yeah. So think of your favorite big mountain, right? How many grains of dirt is that thing made of? Right? They're all made of grains of dirt, pretty much, right? I mean, okay, rocks are igneous and some are composite. But ultimately, you could chip an igneous rock down and make grains of dirt. How big is a grain of dirt? Oh, about the size of a mustard seed. Right? So as I was reading this, I was thinking of Lord Jesus, who I'm a big fan. And I was thinking, what would happen if you took a view of the mountains in your life? They look pretty impossible to move. Right? Mountains look pretty impossible to move. But if you had a view that said, if I just moved it one rock at a time, I could get the thing from here to over there. Okay, we were talking environmentalism. Let me parenthetically interrupt here and say, mountains are perfectly fine right where they are. Okay, they're actually probably doing better. But let's say a metaphorical mountain, the obstacle you must face, Sisyphean mountains, right? But if you wanted to move one from here to there, gosh, that thing seems completely immovable. It's so big, but it's made up of all of these tiny little parts. If you had the right worldview, if you had the right kind of patience, if you had the right kind of community building and development program, you could eventually move that mountain. Would you move the mountain in your lifetime? Not if you're going mustard seed by mustard seed, but if you had a long enough view, you could move that mountain. And if we're going to be sons and not matches, this is the type of view that we need to take. A couple of really cool examples that I learned about this week. The new college at Oxford, have you heard about this? Built in 1379. The roof beams apparently are these amazing oak, thick roof beams. And the builders thought, for about 400 years, those roof beams will probably need to be replaced. So they planted from sapling an oak grove on the campus of the new college at Oxford, so that in 400 years, oaks would be the right size, because you couldn't have an oak like this, you'd have to have an oak like this to make the thickness of those roof beams. 400 years is also how long it took to build the temple at Angkor Wat. Right? So people say, oh yeah, we'll start now. You can see what happens, Dharma practitioners, hundreds of years, centuries from now, will have a place to worship. Stonehenge, you heard of that one? The Discovery Channel told me that it was aliens, but historical record says it probably took about 1,500 years to complete. So, what kind of a vision is that? One activist that I was reading in a while ago talked about real inspiration from early Christianity. Early Christianity also did some terrible stuff, but as a model, they did something really cool. They started from a couple of poor people in an unknown region of Roman-occupied Judea and grew to the dominant religious force in the world. It took about 300 years. And how did they do that? They had this ministry, at least in the beginning, of kindly going around and giving food to people and saying, hey, the meek shall inherit the earth. It's cool, come on over, come to our meeting. Right? So I'm not saying convert to early Christianity, but I am saying that when we can take these type of views, we can make change that we can't even envision right now. Can the fire of our commitment be that strong? There is a lot to change right now. There are people being hurt in the world right now, and that should break our heart. But if our heartbreak breaks us so that we can act on their behalf, more people will be hurt down through the ages. Can we find a way to think 500 years into the future? To think, what would Gaia do through me? And to make these intentions and to be able to go forth with a fire of commitment that doesn't go out. It's so bright. It's clean nuclear, man. This is a liberal church, and we should all be on board with clean nuclear inside our hearts. I don't know about the next. I don't know how they're doing on that right now. I saw a TED talk on it, but I'm not sure I believe it. So in closing, Jesus also said, "What will the kingdom of heaven be like?" And he said again, "It's like a mustard seed." smallest thing in the world, yet when you plant it in fertile soil, it creates a plant that all kinds of birds and animals can come and find shelter under its leaves. I think that the seeds that we plant every day through our smiles and handshakes, stopping at stoplights, buying hemp and bamboo toilet paper wrapped in biodegradable bioplastics, are mustard seeds that we're planting every day. And when we understand that life is much bigger than little old me, the energy and the commitment that we can have to plant these seeds is inexhaustible. All right, we got 2 minutes for talk back. What do you think about that? Thoughts? Qualms? Everyone says okay. Okay? What do you think, Seth?
I was fascinated by the planning beyond a lifespan.
Yeah.
And I don't think we even can conceive of that here.
It's amazing, yeah. We're like, just so, because it's kind of just a choice, right? It's not true that this little person's life is the most important. That's just what the advertisers tell us. Isn't that interesting? And yet, it's so far out. Like yeah, doing something that's 200 years from now. That's such a trend. What else? Yeah, Karen.
I was thinking about times when I burned out. And I burned out working for public schools. I mean, I had that sun going for a long time. And then when it burned out, I was done. I didn't want to teach ever again. So even though I'm not in the role of working for public school, I teach my son at homeschool. I have an infant literacy program that I work with. I do tutoring and stuff like that, so I can still have that gift, which is the sun, but I'm not burning out because I'm not going up against a system that I find proper.
Yeah. So sometimes we can have that hope and surrender our agendas too, or surrender one particular plan and find out that doesn't have to impact that hope and that commitment. Yeah, very beautiful. Any qualms, rebuttals?
I just was thinking, listening to you, that I think the Earth, the planet, isn't actually in danger. I think it's still going to exist, no matter what the humans do. But I think the human species might sort of be in danger.
Sure.
So thinking that way for me is helpful.
Yeah.
In terms of not feeling like I got some sort of control, or I don't need control over Gaia. She's fine.
Yeah.
But I would like to support her to take care of the people.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you say that but those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah. It brings to mind, I'm really into this Jungian method of, it's a little interesting, but I'm going to give a talk on it another day. But you use deities or archetypal images, not like you believe them, but you use them mythically. And so you would actually imagine, in this case, like praying to Gaia, and then ask her, well, what can I do to help humanity? How can we work together? And they say this, it's a great technique to kind of unblock our unconscious, because these insights come through, right? Like, planet Earth has gone through 5 major extinction events before the one that we're creating actively right now, right? This is just number 6 for her. It's not our first rodeo. But there are places to gain insight about if we'd not like to be part of that extinction event, how might we go about that? Yeah, really beautiful. Last one, any thoughts, rebuttals,
I'll say
insights? Yeah.
Sometimes when you go to the election and I think, wow, my vote will not move the California decision, and the California decision won't even change the federal decision.
Yeah.
Even if I could control it. But I went to work and I saw everyone wearing their little tags, I voted, and with pride. And sometimes you have to sort of step aside from the math of it all and just say, I want to be a part of something that everyone loves.
Yeah, beautiful, really beautiful. It reminds me too, one of the tactics of being a keyboard warrior on the internet. One of the things that they say is, if somebody says something misogynistic online, I feel a lot of us have a duty to say, hey dude, that sounds pretty misogynistic. And if you think about that the point was to change their mind, you'll think it's pretty pointless, because a lot of folks who are entrenched in those views don't change their mind. But if you think about the point was that if you're a man and a woman was listening to that misogyny and you stood up, what does that do to the wider conversation, right? So if California has these record numbers in something and somebody else sees that, that's still a drop that creates these ripples, perhaps. Well, this is the fire of commitment. I hope yours has been stoked today. And let's stoke it a bit more with some lasagna in honor of our national festivals. So if you